And welcome. And what we're going to have tonight is just look through. And welcome.
What's
and
going
what we're
on?
going to have tonight is just look through. And welcome.
What's
and
going
what we're
on?
going to have tonight is just look through. We're going to see what's going through the British politics at the moment and see what idiots like this is doing. So we're going to start off with talking about the Labour Party.
You mentioned the Prime Minister. You will remember that he described the calls back in January for a national inquiry as people jumping on a bandwagon of the far right. When you reflect on that, was that wise?
Look, I think that what the Prime Minister was saying...
Well, we know what he said because he said it. He said that people that was upset about rape gangs and mainly Pakistani Muslim rape gangs was jumping on the far right bandwagon, and the abuse of children was far right if you wanted to stop it. So that makes 97% of the UK population far right.
This was in the wake of sort of Elon Musk furore.
She means Elon Musk talking about the actual rape gangs in the UK that we keep allowing to happen.
Was that the Conservative politicians, Kemi Badenoch, the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp, that he was saying they were jumping on the bandwagon that of Elon Musk talking about on Twitter. I think it was actually Liz Truss. She gets forgotten in this story. Liz Truss who started it, and then Elon Musk carried it on. Is that he was like, where have you been? You've just been in government. You were the policing minister and the children's minister. Where have you been? And frankly,
but was that a knee-jerk reaction simply because they are politicians on the right?
No, I think it's because they're politicians who had never cared and thought it was politically expedient.
Some of us have been talking about this for so many years. I had an account removed from YouTube because I talked about it. I was kicked off Twitter because I talked about it and because I talked about the vaccine.
You mentioned
the Conservative politician. He was saying they were jumping on the bandwagon that of Elon Musk talking about on Twitter. I think it was actually Liz Truss. She gets forgotten in this story. Liz Truss who started it, and then Elon Musk carried it on. Is that he was like, where have you been? You've just been in government. You were the policing minister and the children's minister. Where have you been? And frankly,
but was that a knee-jerk reaction simply because they are politicians on the right?
No, I think it's because they're politicians who had never cared and thought it was politically expedient.
That was the end of it, that's why. And that was Jess Phillips, our Minister for Children, that couldn't care less about children. And that's the problem in the UK. Most of our MPs couldn't care less about anyone. They're interested in the power and that's it.
I mean, it's taken us between 8 to 10 weeks to get her comfortable to interview.
She's making the police talking about rape gangs.
Basically being forced to give oral sex through to gang rapes, accused of blokes while she's been pinned down, having sex with her, held hostage for between 10 and 13
our
hours.
MPs and councils were
it's
hiding.
Quite horrendous, really, what she's actually
police
coming
was
out
hiding
with.
it, councils
she went away
was
the first
it.
night and sat and wrote a list of males that she needs to speak about who are offenders. She actually came up with 101 names.
101 names from
and
her
we know
area
for a fact of what she's already told us in the 8 to 10 weeks beforehand. She's actually missed a lot of names off anyway. So
you're probably looking at about 150
offenders.
You know, that's obviously added to the vast amount of people we're already looking at. So yeah,
it's at least 150.
That's right. Yeah.
So at least 150 people abused her.
Right. Now there's a few others.
And this is what governments and councils keep wanting to cover up.
She'll talk about the urine throwing episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's taken us...
So I do have to raise the
Joanna
language the Prime Minister
crumbles as
used
she
in
gets
January
talked about,
when he, I'm afraid to say,
asking about
smeared
grooming
campaigners
gangs.
as jumping on, quotes, a far-right bandwagon, simply for calling for the very inquiry he has now been forced to set up. Standing up for rape victims is not far-right. So will the Deputy Prime Minister apologise for what the Prime Minister said?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I say, Mr Speaker, that the Prime Minister did not just raise issues but acted on them. He brought the first prosecutions against grooming gangs, called for action to address ethnicity issues in 2012. The Prime Minister made those comments specifically about Tory ministers who sat for years in the government and did absolutely nothing about
Labour
this
government
scandal.
covered it up. It was Labour councillors that was
Smearing
and
campaigners
councils
standing up for rape victims
were being
as
abused.
far right is completely unacceptable,
Well,
and the Prime
everyone's
Minister
coming,
should
Sir
never have
Lowe.
said that.
She's coming. What's that with the sound on this? Oh, that one ain't got sound, right? Stop this one.
I think it's okay to ask oneself, you know, where were you, and did I do a good enough job knowing what we found in Rotherham? So that's why I suppose really what I've been saying when I've had the chance to do so in the last not even 24 hours, but that I think we've just got to attempt to put sort of children in particular at the heart of any discourse, really.
The police and councils never put children at the heart of any of this. They actually help cover it up for the grooming gangs.
At all in the land wouldn't agree with the findings of what it is I'm trying to do. So just to set the context, I'm very conscious this is the Home Affairs Committee, so it's not like I'm appearing in front of people that don't know some things. So if I'm grandmother suck eggs, forgive me. I'm sure you know a great deal about these subjects as others don't. But I think it's important to say that what is called group-based child sexual exploitation, which is quite a mouthful in itself, is thankfully still rare. It may be at the most heinous end of crimes, but you know, we have to get a sense of the proportionality of where it fits in that 100,000 crimes of child abuse that have been reported in the last 12 months. I'm fairly sure that it's still happening today. I think that we can explain that if necessary later. I think people don't necessarily look hard enough to find these children in particular. I think that the world of crime is quite complicated. We've had, you know, to quote colleagues in the police, they are awash with online harm and online
They're trying to blame
exploitation.
online, but it's
We've
not
had,
online that did all
sort of
this.
growth in the
It
visibility
was actually
of county
people
lines,
meeting up with children,
and
kidnapping
child
children,
criminal
and taking them off the street.
exploitation at the
And they're
same
trying to
time
make
that
it
I
out
don't
like
think
it's
child
over and
abuse
done with
or
already.
indeed child sexual exploitation
When we
has
keep
gone
getting it, and
away.
it's still
And
happening
certainly
day to
from
day.
the
We've
evidence
got
that we saw
local
during the
girls from
audit,
where I
the visits
live
that we
in
undertook to
Dover
some
and
police
Folkestone
forces,
that are being
it is clear
kidnapped
that it
off
is
the
still
streets,
data, the
taken
national
into these
data
crappy
on grooming
hotels that they're
gangs
leasing,
is
and the police are
sound,
doing
not
nothing.
often accused of being a civil servant, but incomplete
Blaming the
and
girls for being
unreliable is what is written
prostitutes
here.
or saying that
I would
they're
say
in love
that's
with
putting
the
it mildly.
immigrants.
And I feel very strongly
And
on issues
please let
that
me make
are
it clear,
as
if it's a white
searing
group gang
as
doing it,
people's race,
Pakistani
then
Muslim
actually
gang doing
we
it,
know
black
the
group doing it,
prejudice and
care.
racism that people of colour
They should all be locked up
experience
for
in this
life,
country, to not
as
get
we do not have
how
the
you
death
treat
penalty.
that data right, actually I think is a different
But we need all the
level
data.
of public irresponsibility. Sorry to put it so bluntly, I didn't put it that bluntly yesterday, but I think it's particularly important if you are collecting those sorts of issues to get them 100% right. And if you are not getting them 100% right, please don't use them to justify another position, which is potentially what happened. So, and that may be well-meaning, it may not be well-meaning, but that's how the data has run. And I think the sooner we bring a close to that, and either, my view is collect something or don't collect something. For God's sakes, don't half-collect it. That's a bloody disaster, frankly. And so then, I think it's a matter now of public record. We dug deeper into 3 police force areas where there's a clear high rates of child sexual exploitation offending, and dug deeper into those to see whether they had established the facts and figures, and they had established the facts and figures much more than the national data. That then meant I was somewhat tougher, actually, in the way I've just talked about the national data, because if I know it can be collected in large police forces effectively, why can't I collect that nationally? Do you see me added to the sort of sense, oh dear God, what on earth have you done here? So I think it's clear that if you look at those 3 large police forces and their data, one is historic, to be fair, the other 2 are live, then the disproportionality issue is clear, and obviously when they ask for ethnicity, they largely, one stops at Asian, the other stops at Pakistani heritage. And again, I can only feel the pain of those communities to know that it's all bundled together in one big grouping, and how unhelpful that is to the very communities that you are talking about. So again, I think that that's not a great way for public policy to be done. Andy Burnham, quite rightly, in my view, did a bit of what I'm doing, which is he thought, this stuff is going on in Greater Manchester. I need to be assured, he called them assurance reviews, what's going on in Rochdale, what's going on in Oldham. I need to see what the police are doing, and he'd had actually victims and Maggie Oliver in a big meeting in whatever it's not the town hall, but whatever his place is in Manchester. And they'd all agreed that, people had to be held to account. We had to find out the truth. We had to find out were decisions made. If you look at the assurance reviews that he had done, he was so frustrated, and so would I have been, so were the people that did those reviews, that it took years. Nobody shared data. They were all lawyering up to fight over who would share what data.
The council covered it up.
And, I put it in more mild terms in the report, but when it came to report 3, which I think was like 4 or 5 years later, the guys resigned, and the thing was handed over to sort of a statutory body in the National Inspectorate and Ofsted. And so I thought to myself, okay guys, come on. Nobody's volunteering to find the truth here, and we owe these victims that. Secondly, you see, extremely important assurance reviews by Greater Manchester Mayor, who's one of the, long-standing mayors, knew what he was doing. He couldn't get to the bottom of it. And then you look at the 50 serious case reviews, and you look at the world of serious case reviews, and you see that, to be honest, Mr. Richards, they do not get to the truth of what happens in these cases. What they do is, has the team around the child operated effectively? Now, that's really important, don't get me wrong, but, part of the team around the child are the perpetrators, who spot that the team around the child isn't good enough or can't safeguard that child enough. Do we talk about the predators in any of these serious case reviews? Did we know about these predators? Were we properly safeguarding the children? So you can tell from my tone, I said to everybody, I'll be really measured. Don't worry, I won't get, like that about it. But when you start talking about this, you think, yeah, that's why I want a statutory inquiry. And that's why it has to be national with strong local, there's a connection between the local and national. So I know it's not what everybody wanted. You can't ask the local, but I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. People, I hope that if anybody has teenage girls and adolescent girls in the room right now, if they disappeared overnight, do the inquiry. You can't ask local councils, because they're the councils that have covered it up. Absolutely beside yourselves. But because we're dealing with kids that haven't come from that, we as a state attempt to have a safety net. And that safety net doesn't see that missing, so even though it's an important thing and you have missing task force and that sort of, it doesn't grasp the bigger picture. And I think fair play to West Yorkshire Police, they have an analyst, Mr. Smith, I've forgotten his first name, and Paul Smith. And after Rotherham had happened, he, often in public service you find individuals, don't you, and you think, wow. And so he developed what they call an algorithm. I'm not sure it is an algorithm, but let's go there. And essentially what he did was say, if we put together missing more than twice and put that across, I mean, you'll be aware of this, put it across kids perhaps in children's homes, I think it is, or in child in need. Then they put it across whether they'd ever been on the radar of anywhere in the criminal justice system. Hey presto, you have a completely different cohort. And I think that we say as a system, and I include myself in this, missing is really important, but then it really turns into a transaction rather than, oh dear God, where is this child? Now, if we had rape laws that meant when said child has gone out all night with said perpetrator and his friends, that we will do them for rape, it changes the conversation of the state, really, because rape is seen as one of the most, quite rightly, terrible things that can happen, and particularly terrible.
But they blamed the poor girls and said that they were prostitutes.
I'm trying to use the opportunity of this audit to say, how do we reset how we think about children? And it's also why, Dame Karen, I'm so concerned about the whole children's services side of this, in that I think they don't even see those children. So how can you would look at missing, you would look at who's on your child in need, you'd look at the moment, they just have neglect for most of these kids. I think there's some very profound questions to be asked about what's happening in and around children, of which missing, we call it a red flag. You think some sort of beaming noises, a beep should go off on my phone when Louise Casey goes missing. There's plenty of politicians that wish that was possible, but it's sort of, and yet it's
really important to collect ethnicity and race data, and you've set out really comprehensively why that's the case. But I just think about other kind of child sexual group exploitation that we've seen. So there's been significant ones in the Catholic Church. Also in my city of Edinburgh, there's been significant challenges in boarding schools. And I just wonder, are there other data points we should be collecting?
All the data
Religion,
points should
for
be
example,
collected.
Would be one. But are there other markers you think, or just
that's just a silly question?
Ethnicity and race have been singled out so specifically. I mean, I understand why, but why not others?
So chapter 4 of the report looks at what we call the nature and characteristics of child-based exploitation. It's not an academic exercise of interest, finding out what it looks
sex,
like. It's actually for important reasons of understanding offending and being able to, by understanding it better, being able to tackle it better. So there's a whole range of things in that chapter, including ethnicity. Ethnicity stands out as one of the areas where data collection has been really poor, where it's been seen as an optional extra. But there are lots of others in there, and we've spoken about some of them. The vulnerability factors associated with victims, for example, understanding those, like missing episodes and so on, can be really important in better tackling offending. All of the demographic information is important, and we go through it all in that chapter.
And it all should be labelled down, and it should be factual.
In general, it's really important to understand
not
who
their
is
own
being
preference
affected by crime and who is committing it, and where there's overrepresentation of certain sections of society, whatever that might be: age, sex, religion, culture, nationality, ethnicity. Those are important things to understand in order to work out how you better protect the victims and prosecute the perpetrators.
And I think the other interesting thing about this, it's interesting as a sort of been around a long time, is that you don't always have to collect national data. You could actually have done a deep dive. Policy making can be done in many different ways. I think that the issue is that people don't always find looking at ethnicity straightforward in certain circumstances. In some ways, they find it really easy to look at it, look at the Metropolitan Police and Black Londoners. So, there's an irony to sometimes we decide to find this data writ large, and other times we decide not to. So, I'd add religion into that as well. You could easily run a deep dive into a set of data to establish all sorts of drivers, but nobody's bothered. Sorry, that's too harsh. Nobody has.
It's true. Nobody has bothered.
A priority, and I think sometimes my main view
no
about
one
these
cared
things
about the
is
kids
that
enough to do it.
if the good people
It was easier to look the other way for votes than it is to actually
that will grasp them for you.
look
So
at all
I'm
the
always
details.
a believer, no matter who is in power. I've worked for several prime ministers, several different administrations over the years, and my advice to everybody always is get ahead of trouble and grasp it, because you're a good person, and there's plenty of people out there that grasp the bad stuff and make it even worse than it needs to be. I'll come to Bradford in a second. The first one you mentioned was the where we talk about Rochdale. So just, sorry, I may not have made myself clear earlier. So I think Andy Burnham did a good thing in Greater Manchester to say, I'm not happy with what's going on here. He listened to victims. He did talk to police.
The London Mayor doesn't want one because he knows that it's going to destroy London.
He instituted assurance reviews, that's what they called them, to try and establish exactly what you're wishing, I think, for Bradford. And two good people did them. I met one of them, who I know was in Commissioner in Rotherham when we were there, and they only got so far, because essentially they couldn't require people to give them information. They couldn't require people to give them...
Which was stupid.
...appear before them. They couldn't... didn't have any ability to do hearings. And as I think we put in the report, it just went on and on and on, and then they did this work, but nobody... It took a long time before anybody said, as in the new Chief Constable, who said, yeah, we didn't get this right and we're sorry to victims. And that's why we put it in there to say, even when you have...
They didn't get it right. How can I say they didn't get it right? It was a complete and utter clusterfuck. Let's be honest about it. They claim that no children at one point got abused. Then they found out 6,000 children in the UK got abused. Then they said that it wasn't predominantly Pakistani Muslim rape gangs. Then they found out it was 85 to 90% Muslim Pakistani rape gangs. Are there white gangs out there? 100%. Should they all go to prison for life? 100%. Should any group that are abusing children go to prison? 100%. We don't have the death penalty in the UK, so anyone touching kids can't get that. So they should be life. But if we have people that are illegal immigrants, or that, they should be deported. I don't understand why this is controversial. I don't understand why sticking to the law is controversial anymore. And we have groups in the far left and the LGBT community that are saying now maps should be added to it, which is a minor attracted person. All these people are sick in the head, and I know lots of people from the LGBT community that would never ever have them in their community. They are worse than I am. On not wanting kids anywhere near adults.
Which is what the mayor is, where you have a police crime commissioner or a mayor that says, I want this to happen, and he spends money getting it happen, it didn't get him what he wanted, which was accountability on behalf of the victims, and the system was what happened. So that's why I, again, just doubling down on that looking at that, interviewing various people, we came to the view that without statutory powers, Inquiry Act type powers, you're not going to get anywhere. And then I agree that if you, I would say, if you were Bradford, if you were anywhere in my report that we published yesterday, if you were any of the areas that are sort of visible and identifiable, just be ready and be open to the fact that you may be the subject of one of the national inquiries. And I would be surprised if some of the areas that I mentioned, probably including Bradford, would not be subject to being part of a national inquiry. And it's absolutely right that I think members of Parliament, I think victims, I think other people are able to say, we want this to happen here, and that should be balanced out with what I think should be dare I say, an evidence-based and data-led approach to looking at where you would start and where you would head. So I didn't want Mr. Moore today to get into, this is my hit list, let's just use common parlance, or, you know, dare I say it, this is where I think you should start, because I don't think that was my job. My job was to establish a different set of facts. Do I think you can look at the audit and make that part of your decision-making process, whoever is going to take that role on? I think I probably would if I was theirs. And I think I'm sensing and understanding, having met Fiona and seen her previously on Newsnight, good for them for giving her that voice. The government will need to move relatively quickly on making a headway on starting some local and doing the national inquiry, running into some of these local inquiries and getting on with them, because I think the sooner we get on with them, the sooner we can get accountability on the table. And even if we can never ever do right by the victims, because at the end of the day the people that did those crimes are the perpetrators, we can at least get the system to look at where it needs to apologise, where it should be accountable, and where it should make redress. So I'm sorry, it's a very long-winded question to your answer, but I thought it was important just to be as open about what I think is possible.
I am obviously specifically interested in how prisons are helping to tackle violence against women and girls, both people who are in prison for offences related to violence against women and girls, but also people who may be in prison for other offences but may still have problems with having committed acts of violence against women and girls. There are a multitude of things I could ask you about that, and I'm sure we'll enjoy a conversation later, but do you know how many prisoners per year there are who are in prison because of violence against women and girls offences, and how many of those are engaging in courses that are not just like general rehabilitation courses or work skills, but are specifically on courses?
That's a woman that knows nothing about our prison system.
So the answer to the first part of your question, although, and it is lovely to see you here from the Justice Committee, obviously this is in the remit of the Ministry of Justice, but the answer to your first question is no, we don't know the data on how many people are in prison or are charged with specific... We have a number of different data sources that we could look at, certainly from the police charging perspective.
So
it was identified in the recent sentencing review undertaken by
Isn't when all this data is done, why isn't it all
because the
done on a computer so they can cross-examine it?
Borne out in David Gawk's
and you can find out all the data points.
That the most
that should be common sense in any first world country.
As domestic abuse. There is no crime of domestic abuse. And that there is a flagging system in policing, and so some of the data will sit there. But most are common assault. I'm afraid to say one of the best ways we used to get people sent down was for criminal damage, because we care more about doors than we care about women, and there's quite a lot of evidence you've kicked a door in. And so it's very difficult to tell what's a pub fight and what's a domestic abuse incident. So what David Gawk has suggested in the sentencing review is essentially
she needs to think about what she's saying, so just keep going
domestic abuse related cases. To the question about how many people in prison and or probation who are on courses, I will be completely honest, I have absolutely no idea of the answer of that data, but I'm sure that the Ministry of Justice can provide you with that, and I will make sure that I write to them and ask them to write to you.
Thank you very much.
So the initial position was that we didn't want a national inquiry. Then Louise Casey published her report yesterday, and the position has changed to having a national inquiry. My concern is when you look at the timeline in this report of how many supposed interventions we have had in this country that have not led to action. My concern is that this will be another step of delay. So how can you reassure us? Because the Home Secretary said this inquiry should take about 3 years. How will you ensure that this is not something that diverts attention from the actual work that has to happen?
Look, I don't need to wait for an inquiry to and actually setting up the primary and I think she tried to express this earlier, and the if Louise could only have had one thing, if she'd only been offered one rather than all 12 of the recommendations, she would have taken the National Police one. I think that is like her sort of clear line from the evidence she gave to yourselves earlier from what I watched. There is absolutely no reason why any of that has to wait for findings, and actually, like she said, she envisages them working together. There is I will not wait, and I have to say the department hasn't waited.
It has waited
for findings.
It hasn't done anything so far.
An inquiry to be getting on with the work that needs doing, whether that's TOEX, the task force that leads on this,
children still get
whether
abused
that's
every day.
Other interventions that we fund in the policing space or the support space, that those things all go on, and policy changes will. It's the same, I suppose, with the Angelini inquiry. So the Angelini inquiry, by the way, not a statutory inquiry or one that has struggled to get access to any data, but the Angelini inquiry into the death of Sarah Everard runs alongside the violence.
Because that was one girl that got killed. This is 6,000 girls being raped constantly over years, and now they're saying they're worried because this inquiry is going to show from 2000 in the UK between, I think it's 80 and 150,000 girls have been abused repeatedly. Girls have been killed, girls have still vanished, that they've never found. But she acts like an inquiry for one person is the same as having an inquiry because 6,000 plus girls have been raped. It's already been, people have already been convicted for. They're already back out on the street, and between 80 and 150,000 since 2000.
Against Women and Girls strategy being written, and I'm not holding anything back, waiting for Angelini to say something on police vetting, which she has specifically looked into, for example, before I think with police vetting needs changing. So that is the guarantee that I can give you, and we work alongside inquiries going on all the time. I have to say, a criticism certainly that I would have of ICSA whilst that was running is that for many years people like the Home Secretary were asking for something like mandatory reporting, and were being told by ministers in my position and others that the reason we can't we won't put mandatory reporting in to law is because we have to wait for ICSA. I'm never going to say we have to wait for that if there is a good plan that could be delivered and that I can deliver it.
Okay, thank you. And final question is, this morning when we had Louise Casey in, I asked her which of those 12 recommendations does she think can be implemented swiftly, and when we bring ministers back in 6 months' time, they'll be able to say, yes, we've implemented those. And she said all 12. Do you accept that? Yeah. And will you commit to coming back in 6 months and telling us that all 12 have been implemented?
Look, on the legislative ones, I wish I could sit here and say yes to you. I often, the signs when for cars as you drive around Parliament that say dead slow. I always think, you're not wrong. Parliament moves quite slowly. Legislation has barriers that sometimes I can't foresee. However, most of the lots of the legislation, so one of them we will put immediately into the bill that is currently passing through today. But yeah, look, I don't want to hang about. I seek to put all of these recommendations into place. I literally had a meeting this morning where I said, right, what's, and let's have a next steps conversation immediately.
Yeah, thank you, because the issue is, as we move slowly, there are still victims out there being abused. It's not about survivors, actually, it's about current victims. And so my final question is, going back to our very beginning point about the spending review, there's a lot of new work for the Home Office here. Are you confident you've got the resources to deliver on what we're committing to?
Again, I reiterate my point, I would always like more. Look, Baroness Casey's recommendation 12, which was agreed to by the government, fulsomely by the Prime Minister, the recommendation 12 is that this work will be fully funded. Obviously, that is part of all of the work that has gone on last week. I will be making keen representations, as you can imagine.
Bobbing her head all the time?
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just switching back, Minister, to the recommendations made by Professor Jay and ICSA. When I asked Baroness Casey this morning, which one of those recommendations are you most worried about not being implemented as quickly as it needs to be, she pointed me to the Child Protection Authority.
Yeah.
And I know that you made an announcement in April on this, and you've said that there'll be a consultation at some point later this year on its makeup and remit. But as has been highlighted already, it needs to make a difference to the victims, and we need that as soon as possible. So are you able to give us an update?
Yeah, look, so, obviously it is led by the Department for Education. It sits within their purview, and plans are in place to use existing system and then change them. I won't apologise for making an enormous change in child protection and seeking to consult with experts, including Alexis J, to ensure that happens. I spoke to Alexis yesterday. To ensure that that is done properly. What I do not want to do, and actually sort of refuse to do, I refuse to just do something speedy that delivers something that doesn't do the job. I, like Louise, have spent years I've been on every multi-agency group there is. I've been on a MASH, I've been on the MARAC, I've been on every single in local areas. These groups that are meant to share information, stop people falling through the gaps. You'll excuse me if I don't find that it sometimes just feels like utterly just words written down on pieces of paper. So how do we monitor whether that is actually working? How do we make a body that makes it actually work when so many have tried before and failed, which, to your timeline question, is a real one. And in fact, we've seen a massive decline in the number of child sex abuse cases of all types being raised in child protection issues and serious case reviews. That is utterly alarming to me. When we have, I bet you every single one of your local areas has got a MASH, a thing called a MASH, a multi-agency safeguarding hub. I bet every single one has. So how do we make sure that this works properly, rather than I don't want to just say
make sure that
we'll be able to have a all singing, all dancing, brand new thing by the end of the year, because I'm feeling pressure
look
to
after
do
the
it.
kids.
I want it to be right, and I know that that's how Alexis J feels as well. And Louise Casey, I should imagine. I wouldn't want to put words in her mouth.
An approximate timeline though on the consultation period?
Well, it's by the end of the year it will start. But I mean it is afoot currently, I believe. But again, I would say the Department for Education would be better suited to answer your questions.
Thank you, Minister. One final question. You said that it was be fully funded, all of the Casey recommendations. Do you know how much?
I think, well, no, Louise, you can decide whether it's helpful or unhelpful. Didn't write a figure into the document, so obviously working up exactly what that looks like and what the form of inquiry, what the NCA,
so
some of that work is
cost.
Currently underway, and I suppose I'll revert back to what Louise said, sort of quite. Helpfully, I suppose, is that
so 6,000 girls abused.
So
approximately,
it would
estimated until they get the inquiries going from 2,000
right now, and
80 to 150,000 girls abused.
Well, thank you very much.
In the
very
UK.
generous with your time. I appreciate we were disrupted by votes, but.
Some people think that all people of Pakistani origin are abusers, and some people think that none of them are.
See, no one... Before she goes off on a little tangent, no one thinks all Pakistani Muslims are rapists. No one. Because you'd have to be a complete muppet to think that. No one, and then everyone, only the people that were saying none of them are, was the government, was Labour government, Labour councils, the police, who were covering this crap up.
Has got us nowhere. What Baroness
These are facts and
recommendation
data.
was that we needed better ethnicity data. We still don't have it. What Baroness Casey has recommended, which we will undertake, is the mandatory.
So when you're arrested, if you're black, you can say you're white. If you're white, you can say you're black.
So what she has looked at, admittedly, just in 3 police force areas in the review, found an overrepresentation of
Bradford,
Asian or British Pakistani origin males.
There was Asian males.
It doesn't matter how I feel about that. Those are the facts. And if we ignore that,
crap like
how can we ever come up with
is
solutions?
why so many kids still get abused.
Misogyny.
Because women like her. It's all men.
That's the other characteristic that all of these abusers have.
And this belief that the girls were...
Actually, why it's because the data shows it's all men always, is because most of the time the females get let off with it.
The children were worthless.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, I think that sometimes...
The police said they was worthless.
The
councillors said that they was worthless.
It has been...
the councillors said they was worthless, and the
this
MP
has been
said
written
they was
in many
worthless.
reviews over the years. It's just nothing has ever been done about it to improve the data. We will do that. But what often gets lost for me is actually the way we dismiss women's, and especially young girls' voices. Treat them as if they're criminals, treat them as if they're, sluts and hussies and they were asking for it. That existed for far too long. And one of the things that we will do off the back of this report, and we're trained to do anyway, is get rid of the convictions for anyone under 18 who was accused of being a prostitute. These are children.
They all mutter now. 3 times, Mr. Speaker, these Labour MPs voted against the national inquiry. They voted against it 3 times. Liberal Democrats didn't bother to vote at all, asleep at the wheel. Labour MPs voted against a reasoned amendment to the Children's Bill. At committee stage of that bill, they voted against. At committee stage of the crime and policing...
And it was just kept going on. They was hiding. Labour were trying to hide it because they needed the Muslim vote for the last election. Everyone knows it. But people are afraid to say it. Let's find another video. Oh, this is still scumbag. This is Sean Davis, the Labour MP. Who makes out like he wants an inquiry all of a sudden. He actually told the government that he did not want an inquiry into the grooming gangs because of, I think it was diversity and inclusion.
Secretary Amber Rudd and the then local government Minister Rishi Sunak refused to provide a statutory inquiry into Telford. And that's why we worked together.
You didn't work with anyone, you actually did not want an inquiry into the grooming gangs.
They all mutter now. 3 times, Mr. Speaker, these Labour MPs voted against the national inquiry. They voted against it 3 times. Liberal Democrats didn't bother to vote at all, asleep at the wheel. Labour MPs voted against a reasoned amendment to the Children's Bill. At committee stage of that bill, they voted against. At committee stage of the crime and policing...
What one do we want to go to? Let's try this one.
As a Member of Parliament for one of the largest constituencies, Muslim and Pakistani heritage people, Muslims, I know the sheer anger and...
Oh, by the way, this is the woman that said that the young girls that were being raped and abused should be quiet for diversity and inclusion. And now she's trying to make out like the Muslim community are standing with the girls. She wasn't standing with the girls at the time. She told them to be quiet.
Condemnation that the vast majority of them share, like all Britons, who against those that commit these vile actions and
at the end she tries to make it out.
This is not only backed by recent polling by opinion that shows Muslims are deeply concerned, majority of them, about grooming gangs, but by sermons in mosques, letters from leading figures, demonstrations on the streets, and so much more, often not given the media coverage that they deserve. I am pleased to see the National Crime Agency will be involved in the future inquiries, and let me reiterate in this House that British Muslims stand on the side of victims and support the full force of the law against all perpetrators of abuse. But would the Home Secretary agree with me
Tonight is
that
just
those that
a
display
run to
selective
make sure
outrage
the
or fan
system
the
holds
flames
up
to
and
blame
it doesn't
entire
keep cutting
communities
out.
do nothing to protect
Last time I had a
innocent
problem
victims
with cutting
or
out.
further the cause of victims?
Oh, this is the Scottish Labour leader saying that Pakistani Muslims should take over the country and other presidential...
We will only truly get real power if we just have more Pakistanis sitting in council chambers and parliaments, but actually having more Pakistanis and South Asians sitting in...
Andy, you tried to make out he never said this and it was all made up by racists.
The corridors of power making the decisions. And that's where I'll end tonight, is to say the change is coming. And the days where our South Asian community are viewed as a vote bank or a curry bank are well and truly gone.
I've never ever heard
the
of
days where South Asian communities get to lead political parties and get to lead countries is now upon us. The days when South Asian communities get to decide not just which school our children go to, but what they are taught in those schools is also coming.
So an end, he says. Right. This is the worst interview.
Just remind listeners where the new crossing is, where it takes off and where it lands.
She doesn't know where...
You'll forgive me, I can't...
This is going off topic a bit, because I haven't got no more videos on it, but this is the Labour MP that's there to talk about the infrastructure of the UK, and she starts talking about bridges. And she doesn't know where the bridge starts, she doesn't know where the bridge ends, and it just shows you what a shit show the actual government is.
Recall the exact landing zones.
So the crossing that you're talking about, you don't know where it is?
Well, it's the Lower Thames crossing,
yes,
which has been in planning for many, many years.
It's almost as if you were reading from a piece of paper there, isn't it? you don't actually know where it takes off from or where it lands, do you?
You'll forgive me, Nick.
I don't want to go on about this, but it is about the 19th word in the press release, the Lower Thames crossing. Let me tell you, Gravesend in Kent, Tilbury in Essex, those are the two towns.
Tilbury, yeah. It was Tilbury that I couldn't... Yeah.
How much is it going to cost?
Yeah. Well, it's going to cost quite a lot of money, but we today are annouing £590 million towards that cost.
But how much is the crossing going to cost, Secretary?
Well, overall, it's going to cost several £billion.
How many? You don't know that either, do you, actually?
Well, it has already cost quite a lot of money.
I don't wish to be rude to you personally. Is there much point continuing this conversation? Because you don't know where a bridge starts, you don't know where it ends, and you don't know how much it costs. So is there any point continuing?
As I said, the money that we are putting in is crucial to unlocking this project, which has been years in planning.
Secretary, you don't know how much it is.
Well, it's several billion, as I've said.
It's 10 billion.
10 billion.
Let's put you out of your misery.
10 billion.
Yeah, so it's not several, it's 10. What does this say about the economic stewardship of this country, that someone in your position of importance, you don't know where a bridge starts, you don't know where it ends, and you don't know how much it costs?
You don't know how much it costs.
What's
This is
that
the
say?
Labour government.
I'm here to talk about the broader infrastructure plan as well that we will be launching later this week.
Well, for the benefit of my listeners, I will continue. When will the Hammersmith Bridge problem be resolved?
I'm not here to talk about the Hammersmith Bridge. I'm not a transport minister.
But you're talking about infrastructure. You're talking. Sorry, I thought we just talked about 3,000 bridges that are unable to support the heaviest vehicles.
I don't have the detail of the Hammersmith Bridge.
But that's one of the key bridges that can't support any vehicles, let alone the heaviest of vehicles. So clearly that must figure in this.
The plan, the money that we are allocating today will go to such bridges, to go to repair bridges and to make sure that those bridges can take a load. And as you said at the top, there are 3,000 bridges across the country that can't take a load.
Right. And one key one is the Hammersmith Bridge, so that's not part of this at all.
There will be Hammersmith Bridge and others will be, but that will be down to local. I mean, look, I can't come on your programme and give you the dates for every 3,000 bridge that will be.
I'm merely asking that one of particularly. It's been closed, I think, for around 6 years. We hear of a new initiative by the newish government, 3,000 bridges. One of the ones that really jumps off the page, of course, is Hammersmith Bridge. And you don't know whether any of these funds are going towards Hammersmith. Is that correct?
I can't name every one of the 3,000 bridges.
Respectfully, I've not asked for that, have I, Secretary?
I've
just asked, can you confirm that it is going to get some of the funds from this £1 billion?
Well, further detail will be set out in written statements to Parliament.
And that's what you call crashing out. Right, let's go on to Twitter now for a quick look. So we want to go turn that one off, turn that one on. Do that one. So I've got it on the other screen to make sure it's working all right. Last time people said it was stuttering and cutting out. So here we have Jeremy Atako filmed himself raping a 2-year-old girl in Diversity, Manchester. The footage graphic, they reckon even the people watching it was crying their eyes out. And he's from 35. He come to here as a refugee from Africa and he's been jailed for 15 years. So we're going to be paying, I think it's about £170,000. Sorry, £750,000, nearly £1 million to keep him in prison for the 15 years. They can't deport him because he's wanted in Africa, and if he goes back, he will be put into jail, will be killed or tortured. So we're going to keep him. We have another paedophile, Soresh Amini, 21, raped a 13-year-old child, and received 7 years in jail. And people that actually get life, leave the kids alone. He will be out in probably 3 to 4 in the UK. Who agrees? We cannot coexist with people who think raping children is acceptable. We can't coexist with people that think abusing kids is acceptable. I don't care who you are. If you think that, you're on the wrong channel. The Home Office admits that it has lost over 45,000 asylum seekers. They call them, the Home Office calls these implicit withdrawals. In other words, they are hiding somewhere in our UK. We have 40,000 people on the terrorist watch list. We have 3,000 people that are known terrorists in our country that have actually committed crimes with terrorists. We have paedophiles getting out on early release and committing crimes again. We have rapists getting out early and committing crimes again. We had one rapist that couldn't even wait for 4 miles. He got into a car with a female driver and groped her as soon as the car pulled away and said he could do it, and was rearrested. And this is the sort of people we're letting back out on our streets. These little pedos as well have all gone to prison. They haven't gone to prison for long enough in most circumstances. But these should have got life as well, little animals. Took one girl into the back of the van, and then he was filming himself abusing her, and them two turned up to abuse her. All of them should have got life, because we don't have death here. They're asking for conscription in the UK. What would people do? Why should our kids keep going to other countries to die for other people's wars? And this is the thing that the UK has got to stop. Yeah, she's a bit retarded, but this was funny. This is President Trump. If it loads. Let's reload it. I know, it looks like it's going to run the system too slow. She's not there. That's a Labour MP saying that we are all Palestinians. And I said, no, you don't talk for everyone, you talk for 1%. It's Trump. There's old Tommy Robinson. And that was a paedophile caught in Halifax, meeting a 13-year-old child. Another paedophile in Manchester, just come over from Pakistan. And you can just see it, that's a fake picture. And it just time after time after time, people making these mistakes. As I said, this was just a test run. I will get more videos now for next time. Thank you for the people watching. Thank you for the people on Twitch, Rumble and Kick and YouTube for coming in and saying hello. And